Tottenham Hotspur currently find themselves in a precarious position, sitting 15th in the Premier League, just 1 point above Everton and a mere 8 points above the relegation zone. Things are not looking promising for Ange Postecoglou, and the pressure is mounting on the Australian manager. If Daniel Levy were to make the decision of sacking Postecoglou, it would signal the end of yet another failed project at the club. One name that has been linked with taking over the reins is Edin Terzic, a manager fresh off of leading Borussia Dortmund to the Champions League final just a few months ago. Terzic's arrival could mark a new chapter for Spurs. So when there is a managerial change, there will be a series of changes that do occur, starting off with the formation and the structure and the tactics going forward. Now, I have deployed this Tottenham side in a 4-1-4-1 system and a formation that Terzic has favored in the past with his time at Borussia Dortmund. He also did play a 4-2-3-1 from time to time, but with the personnel in the current Spurs team, I think that they definitely do suit the 4-1-4-1 Edin Terzic structure. Now, taking a look at the selected positions, and I have set Dominic Solanke to play up front. I do think that he fits the mold of an Edin Terzic striker. If you think back to the Borussia Dortmund sides, the likes of Nicholas Füllkrug was deployed up front to use his physicality and make sure that he was linking the play and holding up the ball higher up the field, especially if you are looking to ping those longer passes further forward, and then have the striker link up the play with the wingers or the attacking midfielders and so on. As for the two wingers, of course, Son being the club captain will start on that left-hand side, but you also have players like Odegaard and Johnson who can also be deployed in this role, and essentially the winger will look to make sure that he is in and around the same zones as the striker, looking to link up with him, but also attacking the half spaces and the left-hand channel. On the right-hand side, I have deployed Kulusevski there. Now, if you have a look at the tactics and all that good stuff, he will be deployed as a wide playmaker, allowing him to drift inside, as well as combining with the likes of Assar, Bentancur, and Maddison in the interior zones, and opening up that right corridor for a player like Pedro Porro to bomb pass and attack that right-hand side. Now, the midfield was a bit iffy because I don't really think that in terms of the defensive player, the defensive midfielder, Bentancur, I don't think that Tottenham really have a player that's ready to be deployed in that position. So possibly signing a number 6 could be the first step to Edin Terzic's reign at Spurs. But Bentancur and Archie Gray can fulfill that role for the time being. I do think that with more experience and more time given, Archie Gray could develop into that sort of player. But for the time being, I have selected Bentancur as the deepest lying midfield player, with Pape Matar Sarr being the box-to-box presence. He's got a fantastic engine, and we have seen in the past, whether it's a Nemecha or somebody like that from Borussia Dortmund, they do need to be that engine room that's bombing up and down between the two boxes, looking to be a powerful runner with the ball, looking to collect the ball in those deeper spaces and then drive the team higher up the pitch. And I do think that Sarr does possess that. Maybe even a Basuma could also do that role, but for the time being, I think Sarr, possibly even Bergvall, could maybe fulfill that role to their best abilities. Now, in terms of James Maddison, I'm not the biggest fan of James Maddison because I think he tends to down tools. I think Maddison or Kulusevski could play in this role, looking to be the more attack-minded of the three midfielders, looking to play in and around those zones, connecting the midfield and the defense to the rest of the attack and making sure that he is trying to pull the strings from those central zones. And I think that Maddison in this free attacking type role could definitely replace what Julian Brandt did for Edin Terzic at Borussia Dortmund. And I know I am talking about Borussia Dortmund a lot, but that's all I have to go off of, trying to compare what that team was to what this team could be with the Tottenham Hotspur players. Now, in the back four is where we will see a major change compared to Ange Postecoglou's system. The two fullbacks won't be inverting into the midfield as much and playing as secondary number 10s. They will look to maintain their more traditional roles and overlap the wingers, providing that extra pass or that overlapping run where they can look to supply a cross or a cutback into the box. Now, both Udogie and Porro are really good at doing this, and they can definitely look to create more space for the two wingers higher up the field. And that does mean that Van de Ven, as well as Romero or potentially Dragushin, could definitely be isolated at times, but with the role of Bentancur just in front of them, looking to sweep up, dropping into that left or that right back position from time to time, it can successfully formulate a back three or a back four, depending on how far Udogie does get high up the field. But you won't see them consistently be exploited because, of course, Edin Terzic won't play as high of a line, and therefore you will have a bit more defensive capabilities and awareness from your centre backs, and of course that spacing behind them won't be as vast, so you won't necessarily have to burn out Van de Ven's hamstrings just to recover a potential long ball over the top. And of course the same can be said for Romero, who will be stepping up into midfield from time to time, playing those line breaking passes further forward and just utilizing his passing capabilities to the team's advantage. Now, in my opinion, Romero would take up the Nico Schlotterbeck role from the Borussia Dortmund side, looking to collect the ball and either play those line breaking passes forward or possibly looking to collect the ball and drive up the pitch with it, pushing the entire team up the field. Whereas the likes of Van de Ven, utilizing his pace and his recovery to the team's advantage, he would play more of the Mats Hummels type role where he can look to pass out from the back, but he would look to also be that sweeper out of the two centre backs. Moving on to the Spurs squad, and we will assess the players and who may fit into a Edin Terzic type system and who doesn't. But keep in mind as well that Daniel Levy doesn't really take into account the manager's opinion on the squad. So even if there is a player that doesn't really fit into Terzic's style of play or his philosophy, they might still be here regardless, because essentially Daniel Levy can just fire Terzic and hire another manager later on down the line. So we will start off with the goalkeepers. They've recently brought in Kingski, who I think is a fantastic goalkeeper, has got a bright future ahead and could definitely work out in Terzic's system. Foster as a third choice goalkeeper is fine. As for Whiteman and Austin, I think that they can both get sold and just recoup some of that money. You won't get a lot of money for them, but you don't need 5 goalkeepers in your squad. And then of course you've got your number 1 goalkeeper being Vicario, who is out injured at the moment. As for your 2 left backs, we've got Reguilon as well as Udogie, and shocker, but I do think that Reguilon in this left back role and under this new manager does have a future at Tottenham Hotspur, which again would definitely fit into Daniel Levy's philosophy of, we've spent money on a player and I don't really want to buy a new player, so use what we have. And I'm not going to lie, Reguilon would definitely work in Edin Terzic's system and his style of play alongside Udogie, who would undoubtedly be the starter. But I think that Reguilon, with his experience, I mean, he is 27, 28 now, with his experience, he could definitely look to push Udogie for that starting position. So for the left back department, at least, I think Spurs are sorted in a way. Then we get to the defenders. Ben Davies, in the final 12 months of his deal, if you start up a career mode from the get-go, and in my opinion, he doesn't fit Terzic's system, he doesn't fit his style of play, he's not a centre-back of note, especially if you are playing a back 2, which Terzic has favoured most often, and he's not a good enough left-back. He can't patrol up and down as much. He is 31, 32 years old. He doesn't have the legs to be able to motor up and down that left touchline, so getting rid of him would probably be the best thing to do. But realistically speaking, we may see Daniel Levy extend him for a further 12 months. That way he doesn't have to buy another left-footed centre-back. And then we have Romero, a player brought in 2022. Of course, it was a loan, then it was an obligation to buy, then he was permanent, and he has been at Spurs for the last 2 or 3 seasons, and he's been a very good player in that time, although recently, the last year or so, he has suffered with injuries. Is that down to Ange? Is that down to just Romero's body breaking down because he can't handle the system? Is it down to the training methods? I'm not too sure. I mean, he has like broken his toe and so on and so on and so on. But the point is, recently this morning, literally this morning before I recorded this video, I was speaking to a Spurs fan, and they were saying Romero is probably looking to leave. In the summer, him and his agent were looking to move to somewhere in Spain, possibly Real Madrid. There were those links a few months ago. I don't think Real Madrid would go for Romero based on his age, based on his profile. They don't really need a centre-back like that, but he could be looking to leave. Of course, you also know that a few weeks or months ago, Romero released that statement saying the owners need to invest in the squad. They need to bring in quality players for the team as a whole to elevate and try and compete for trophies and titles and back the manager. So just with the way that has happened and how that's transpired, I do think that Romero might be out the door, which is why I do have a few centre-back options on the transfer list that could replace him and even add more depth to the defensive department. I mean, you've got Dragushin, you've got, Mickey van der Ven, which could be a world-class centre-back if his hamstrings aren't cheddar cheese. But van der Ven as well could also benefit from having a less rigorous training regimens that, possibly the new manager could instill in the side when looking to implement his style of play and his system. And then, of course, you've got Ashley Phillips out on loan, who I think Spurs should look to bring back. He's got a lot of potential. He could definitely play in the system. He could be a very good backup for Romero, playing as that ball-playing centre-back, stepping into the midfield, having the capacity to carry the ball forward, play those line-breaking passes. I do think that Ashley Phillips does have a future in the side, but why have Spurs not brought him back? Would Edin Terzic come in and say, I need another centre-back and I need Ashley Phillips back in the team? So that could be a possibility. Now, for the right backs, just like with the left back area, Pedro Porro, he has done very well. He can definitely play in an Edin Terzic system, but so can Jet Spence. Could Jet Spence push Porro? I'm not too sure. I have been impressed with him this season. He has definitely stepped up. A player that we all thought was definitely leaving Spurs. I mean, he was brought in, what was that, like 2 or 3 years ago, never got a chance. And this season, after multiple terrible loans, this season he is looking to be that player that Spurs had brought in initially, that bombing on fullback, the player that can add a lot to the attack from those wider areas. He has also been doing very well at inverting into the midfield, but of course we know that with Terzic there won't be as much inverting. There will be a lot of outside play, overlapping runs, and both Porro and Spence I think would be great for that right back area. Now, in terms of Basuma, I would probably say you should sell him, but if we look at Højbjerg, who is currently out on loan, that last season you could have bet your whole house on Højbjerg leaving. He went to Marseille on loan, so he's still got a contract with Spurs, and to be honest with you, I think that he would fit into Terzic's style of play and his system, being deployed as that number 6 that can sweep up and drop into the back line when needed. Because if we look at how Højbjerg's playing currently for Roberto De Zerbi in France, he's doing a very similar role, and I think that for Terzic he could obviously do the same. So maybe Højbjerg comes back, maybe he has a lifeline extended at Tottenham, and maybe Bissouma finds himself out the door. Now in terms of Sarr, I would look to convert him into that central midfielder, that box-to-box presence, looking to be that motor up and down the field, and he will be the engine room alongside, of course, Højbjerg or whoever you have in that number 6 position, possibly Archie Gray, possibly. But Pape Matar Sarr would be a fantastic player and a fantastic option for the side. Now in terms of Archie Gray, yes, he is the long-term defensive midfielder. He doesn't need to be played as a right back. He doesn't need to be played as a left back or a centre back. He needs to be played in his position. Now, of course, he can fulfill his role as a left back or a right back, but not a centre back. We've seen him being torn up multiple times because that's not his position. He needs to be in the midfield. He needs to be trying to control the game, dictate the pace of play those line-breaking passes further forward, which is why he has done somewhat well when Spurs have been in possession as that centre back. But you can see that centre back for Archie Gray, there's no future in it. So deploy him in his actual position and everybody will be happy. Now, in terms of the transfers, I haven't put down any fullbacks or any left midfielders because the players that Spurs currently have, Yang Min Hayuk, who they've just brought in, Mikey Moore, of course, and then let's not forget Solomon and Odebear and Son, let's not forget the captain, Son. They're all great options to play in that left midfielder role. Now, in terms of Bryan Hill and Solomon, I do think that they will get sold inevitably, and that will be a lot of money coming into Spurs' back pocket because Solomon was signed on a free and now he's being sold for max profits, right? But in terms of Odebear, in terms of Mikey Moore and this guy right here who they've recently brought in, Yang Min Hayuk, they could all definitely have a future as that left midfielder. And let's not forget, Brennan Johnson, who is right-footed, could also be deployed as that left midfielder in this 4-1-4-1 system. Back into the middle, and Bentancur, Bergvall, and Madison, and I'm not including Kulusevski in that, but those 3 players could all be deployed in one of those number 8 positions. I don't think Bentancur would suit that box-to-box role, but he could definitely play in the Madison role. The same could be said for Bergvall, who I think could play in either role, to be honest with you. He could play as that box-to-box or as that creative number 10, you could say, whereas Madison is more stationed to that number 10 position. So you have some good options here, but you definitely would need at least another player that could definitely play in that Pape Matar Sarr role as that box-to-box presence. Now, we have briefly mentioned Son. He is in the final 12 months of his deal, but he does have that extension kicking through for a further year, and it's safe to say that he is getting up there in age. He is losing his legs, and maybe it's down to Ange Postecoglou's system wearing him away, and possibly with a new manager and a new regiment and all that good stuff, you might see a revitalized Son. We saw that he couldn't cope with Antonio Conte's rigorous running system. Same can be said for Ange Postecoglou's system, possibly. And another thing is, we might even see Son be deployed down the middle. We could see that. It does depend on how Terzic would want his side playing. If they are looking to, ping those long balls forward and looking to get those runners in behind, you would need a target man to hold up the play and then link it up with the runners. And Son could be one of those players making those runs into the gaps, or he could be the player being deployed down the middle, but that would then change the tactical approach that Terzic would want. So I'm not too sure exactly where Son's position is. Is it the left? Is it the central areas? It could be both. You could see Son moving between the two, depending on the moments in the game or depending on the approach to the specific opponents. As for Timo Werner, I do think that he might have a role in Edin Terzic's approach. That could be playing as a striker up front, very similar to Son, or that could be deployed down the left and making those inside runs with his pace, looking to break the opposition's back line. And because Spurs wouldn't be playing as high up, there would be more space for a player like a Timo Werner to use his pace and break him behind, and he wouldn't be caught offside nearly as much. I know, it's a bit of a twist, it's a bit of a weird one, but I oddly just see him working out in a better, more deeper structure with the Spurs side. And I mean, as for Brennan Johnson, I think he could be deployed down the left or the right-hand side, being used in either the Kulusevski role or possibly Son's role as that inside forward. But either way, he is right-footed, so I would naturally think that he would best fit that left-hand side, but then you have too many players in that left-hand side position. And lastly is the striker department. Solanke, Richarlison, Scarlett, and Veliz are the 4 strikers, and let's not forget Will Lancashire, let's not forget him. But Solanke and Richarlison are the mainstay strikers. Richarlison has been linked with a few moves away from the club. That could still happen, that could still materialize, possibly, who knows. But Solanke is the main guy up front. You can see that whenever he plays, and he does have the attributes to fit into the system. Richarlison can also probably hold up the ball, not as well as Solanke, but Richarlison is also a player that could make those runs in behind. And like I mentioned with Timo Werner, with that deeper line being implemented, it would invite the press and the pressure from the opposition onto them, leaving a bit more space for a player like a Richarlison or a Timo Werner or even a Son to make those runs in behind and into the space. So either way, I could see it working out for both of these players, but Solanke would probably be the starting player because he is the newest player, and of course the club have outlaid, what's it, like 60-65 million on a player like him. But I want to talk about Veliz. I think that he also has the attributes to fit into the system as that striker. So if Richarlison does end up going, Veliz could come in and be a very good backup. So without having to spend any money, which does tick the boxes of Tottenham and Daniel Levy and Enoch and so on. Now, I don't know all the owners and the board of directors and all that stuff, but it does tick the boxes for them. They've brought in this player on the cheap. He is young. He does have room to improve and grow. He's 6'1". He's got a great physical presence in those central areas, holding off the defenders, linking up the play, and he could definitely be an option going forward, whether it's this season, next season, or the season after for this Tottenham Hotspur side. Now, in terms of the transfers, I've got 4 main positions that need to be addressed immediately in the January window, and if they don't, because it's Levy and so on, they have got to do it in the summer window when they have a lot more time to make these sort of deals happen. Now, starting off with the centre-backs, we know that Romero may be leaving, and we know that their centre-backs are quite fragile. They have their injury issues. So Taylor Harwood-Bellis from Southampton, who are most definitely going down, could be a fantastic option to back up Romero. The same can be said for Van Hecker, and the same can be said for Schurz. And in terms of Tutor, I think he brings that aggressiveness. Now, I haven't mentioned Lukumi just yet, but in terms of these 4 players, they could all be adequate backups or replacements for that right centre-back role. Now, of course, you've got Dragushin and you've got Ashley Phillips out on loan, but looking to bring in 1, if not 2 of these players that could be deployed as that left-sided centre-back or that right-sided centre-back could work in favour of Spurs, and none of these players would go for 50-60 million pounds or euros. I mean, Spurs are not going to spend that amount of money on a centre-back, but nonetheless, these players could definitely play in that role, and they would more or less bring the same elements to the game as what Romero would. Maybe not all the aggressiveness, but they could bring the ball-playing ability, or if maybe not that, they could bring some more aggressiveness like Tutor. Now, in terms of Lukumi, a left-footed centre-back in the final 12 months of his deal, I'm not sure if he has signed an extension with Bologna, but if not, he is available on a free. And in terms of the balance, I'm not exactly sure if Terzic does prefer to have a left and a right-footed centre-back, in their actual positions. But if he is, Lukumi backing up Van de Ven, if not starting over Van de Ven in certain games, of course, looking to rest his hamstrings and make sure that he is recovering from his tumultuous, injury-stricken last 2 seasons. That could be the best way going forward, and Lukumi's ball-playing ability is fantastic. He's nowhere near as quick as Van de Ven, but he does have that ability to sweep up and defend the spaces that may be left in the back line. Now, we have spoken about the number 6 position being a bit of an issue. Archie Gray is the future. I don't think Archie Gray is ready right now to be playing week in, week out, but definitely utilizing him off the bench for another player could be the way going forward. And maybe that might be Højbjerg, maybe, possibly. I think Højbjerg would actually fit the system really well, but I have put down 3 names here that could also fit that style of play and that system very, very nicely. The one being João Gomes from Wolves. That would be quite an expensive deal, around 40, 50, maybe even 60 million, but it would be worth it. He is 23, so that's quite a close age compared to Archie Gray, who's 18 or 19, I'm not too sure. Gomez would bring the tackling, he would bring the bite in the midfield, he would bring the fight in the defensive areas. And I mean, in terms of Doucouré, he could also bring all those things. He is a bit more press resistant compared to Gomez, and he could also be that platform to try and build up off of. And then you've got my personal pick and my personal favorite, Angelo Silla, a fantastic player, fantastic ball progressor. He would help set the table for the attackers. He would be able to play those line breaking passes, all those lofted passes into the wingers, something that it is a necessity for a new system like Edin Terzic's system to be able to have a player that is very accurate with his passing, a deep lying playmaker you could describe him as. But he's also very good at in the challenge. He can look to sweep up. He does read the game very well, so he's not going to be super aggressive like a João Gomes or like a Doucouré, but he will position himself in the best ways to try and affect the attackers from, or disrupt the opposition attackers from really being able to get into their rhythm of attacking the Tottenham back line. So he will be in and around there, sweeping up and collecting the ball from them, from the back line, and then looking to progress it up the field. Now, I do have 2 right attackers on this list that I feel could definitely back up Kulusevski in that right midfield position. The one being Bonanotte, who is currently out on loan at Leicester, but he will probably go back to Brighton, who will look to sell him. And maybe Tottenham should be in and around there. He is 19, he is quite young, but he's got all the skills and capabilities to be able to be deployed as that, wide playmaker in that role, looking to attack the half spaces and feed in the players like Dominic Solanke or possibly Son making those runs in behind. And the next player is another Leicester player, but that is Futawu. He'll bring a bit more pace down that right-hand space space, and he will be able to attack the byline a bit better, looking to combine with Pedro Porro in those wider areas. But again, currently out injured with an ACL injury, if I'm not mistaken, but he could come back and be a very good addition to a Spurs side. He hasn't really been able to prove himself. Like I said, he has been injured, but he went from Sporting to Leicester last season, and last season in the Championship, he was absolutely tearing it up. He was killing everybody down that left-hand side, down the right-hand side for him, but down the left-hand side for the opposition, and he was very, very good at being able to take on his man and beat the opposition fullback. And that is something that we have not really been able to see from Spurs this season, whether it's Brennan Johnson just aimlessly running into the opposition fullback, whether it's, Kulusevski looking to dribble around him. He's really been their only player, but he does lack that raw pace. Son's legs are going, Odegaard we haven't seen, the other wingers I'm not too sure about, so Futawu would definitely bring an element that the current front line are missing. And the last position is the central midfielder role. Now, more so the box-to-box player. Now, we have Fernandes on the list, we've got Ferguson, and then we've got my personal favorite, Illich, a player that I would love to have at Manchester United, a left-footed, creative playmaker that has an engine room on him of note. And the same can be said for these other two players, but in terms of what you would definitely want, a player that could definitely contest with Sarr for that starting role, I think Illich as that left-footed player would provide not only balance, but try and elevate the floor of Tottenham Hotspur going forward, backwards, sideways, and in the midfield. And then lastly, I thought I would just mention the manager's face and how I found it on YouTube. The link for that will be down below in the description. It is probably the best one that I have found. Of course, it's really difficult to make these player faces, so please make sure that you do give the content creator the love and like the video, and make sure that you probably comment as well under his videos telling him he's doing a great job, and that will maybe encourage him to do more faces. But in terms of what I was able to find on YouTube, this was the best one for FC25. And there you have it, people. That is how I would go ahead and implement Edin Terzic's philosophy and style of play for a Tottenham Hotspur career mode in FC25. I do hope you have enjoyed this video, and if you don't mind smashing that like button down below and subscribing if you are new, and let me know if you are a Spurs fan what your thoughts and opinions are of Ange Postecoglou. Do you think he should go? Do you think he should stay? In my personal opinion, I do like Ange a lot, but his style of play as well as the training isn't sustainable for the players, and therefore it's more detrimental to Spurs. They could go down, I don't think that they would, but it's not 0%. It's not. Currently sitting in 15th, 8 points above the relegation zone. It's not looking good, bruv. It's not looking good. Anyways, until the next time, until the next one, I hope you have a smashing goddamn day, and I'm out of here. Peace.